Thank you. So my talk today is on the gentle art of verbal self-defense. This is a book originally printed back in the 70s. It's been out of print for a long time, last I heard, but there are still used copies available out there. And she's also got a whole range of books on the same topic um, that cover different pieces of the topic, like at work, with your partner, between men and women. A lot of them are about like being a woman in the business world in the 70s and 80s, and how to not be undermined by a very masculine style of communication at work that you may not have been trained in as a kid. But this is the core of it. This is the first book. And she talks about how to deal with verbal attack patterns. So I recommend all the books, but especially this kind of core one. I'm going to talk about the verbal attack patterns and how to counter them. But she's also in this book got lots more examples than I'm going to be able to cover, and journal pages where she encourages you to write down your own examples from your life and think about how you might answer similar kinds of comments. So the basic idea here is that there are people who will say things to you that are actually verbally hostile, that may on the surface not look hostile. And in order to communicate effectively without just being victimized and verbally abused, you need to be able to recognize these patterns and counter them effectively. And her work is building on the work of Virginia Satir and neurolinguistic programming developed by Bandler and Grinder on top of Virginia Satir's work, and she acknowledges their work. So if you're interested in any of those, this connects right up with it. And actually, I wanted to read a quote from the first page that kind of exemplifies what we're dealing with in the sorts of communications that she's trying to help people defend themselves against. If you walk away with a conversation with someone saying to yourself, I can't understand why I feel so stupid when I'm with her. She's always so considerate and she's such a nice person. There must be something the matter with me. That's a really common experience, and it's because of the way they're communicating. The way they're communicating is specifically designed to attack you. The four basic principles of verbal self-defense are: know that you're under attack, recognize the signs of it or the signs that it's coming up, know what kind of attack you're facing, how strong it is, know how to make your defense fit the attack, and know how to follow through. A lot of people, especially women, have trouble actually standing their ground when they're being attacked. And if you're being attacked, you get to fight back. And these approaches are not designed to fight back in the sense of hurting the other person. In fact, she really, really discourages attacking back. It's more like Aikido in the redirecting the attack so it doesn't actually go to you and they have to come up with something else. So in order to make sense of the attack modes, I have to describe Virginia Satir's modes of communication a little bit first. There are 5 stances that you can communicate from. You can be a placater. Oh, I don't mind. You know me, whatever you want. You can be a blamer. Nobody cares about me. You always, how could you? You can communicate in computer mode. Well, that is an interesting thing that many people say, and it is fascinating to consider the possible consequences of. You can be a distractor, mixing up all these modes unpredictably, or you can be a leveler, saying what you feel and what you're concerned about directly. Individual people may have preferences for particular modes within this, but you can pick one to use at a given time. You are not stuck in one. It's a good idea not to be stuck in one. And usually leveler is the one that's easier to actually solve problems in and relate to people in. But if you are in a situation where someone is attacking you and you are verbally, emotionally, maybe even professionally in danger, computer is going to be the safest mode to be in. So you usually want to avoid the others. Placating, blaming, and distracting are not great ways to communicate. Level with people you can level with. Be a computer if you can't safely do that. That's the general idea. The core of these attack modes and recognizing them and defending against them is that they contain presuppositions. A presupposition is something that a native speaker of the language understands is part of the meaning of what's being said, even though it's not explicitly stated in the sentence. For example, if you hear somebody say, even Bill could get an A in that class, they have not said that Bill is a poor student. They have not said that the class is easy, but the sentence means both. And any speaker of English will hear that and understand that that's what's being said. Bill's not a great student, but that class is easy, so he could do well in it. So that's an insult to Bill, and it's also kind of a dismissal of the class as well. Kind of hits two birds with one stone there. When you are doing verbal self-defense, don't respond to the bait. The surface statement is the bait. Respond to the presupposition. You want to identify the satir mode being used. Are they attacking using a direct blaming approach, or are they speaking very impersonally in computer mode? Sometimes there are combinations. If you are being blamed, don't respond in blamer. That just escalates it, makes a fight. Never respond to blaming with placating. That just puts you in the position of a victim and makes it really hard to get your needs met or protect yourself against attack. Responding in computer mode, again, is safest. Computer mode is you speak in the third person, you speak in the abstract, you don't talk about feelings, and if possible, you get as far away from dangerous areas of the topic as possible by just speaking in sort of abstract terms. You can request information about the presupposition, or you can make a remark about the presupposition. So let me get more specific about the types of attacks. We're going to go from very simple attacks to more sophisticated attacks and how you address them. Simple, basic blamer attack. If you really loved me, you wouldn't go out so late. If you really wanted to get an A in this class, you wouldn't turn in papers that look like this. You can substitute in whatever is appropriate for the context for the X and the Y if you really something you would or wouldn't something else. The bait is that you're staying out late or you are turning in bad papers or whatever. Don't respond to that. If you argue that part of it, you are allowing the claim that you don't really whatever slip by. You're admitting to that, or at least not arguing it. So back up, don't even talk about what they're accusing you of on the surface, and approach the if you really. Because if you really attack implies that you don't really love them, want to get an A, care about getting promoted, whatever. So don't argue that either. Don't blame, don't argue. Instead, respond in computer mode to the presupposition. For instance, if someone says, if you really love me, you wouldn't waste so much money. Don't argue about whether you spend a lot of money. Say, when did you start believing that I don't love you? Then you can talk about that. If they're actually concerned about that, then you can talk about that. If they're just trying to use it as a tool to hurt you, at least they're not going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to sneak in the knife with this implied criticism. With all of these attacks, if you respond in computer to the presupposition, you're avoiding an argument that is going to be fruitless. You're requiring them to either talk about what's really bothering them, come out with an outright attack that will be clearly visibly hostile instead of underhanded and make you feel guilty afterwards, or change the subject and go off and stop hurting you. All of those are better outcomes than the sneaky attack. Here's a more sophisticated version of the if you really. If you really, whatever, you wouldn't want to, whatever else. This is sneakier because not only does it say, first of all, you don't X and you should X, it also says you can control what you want and you should. So it's layers of things. And even if you can't win with this one, because even if you managed not to do the thing that they're complaining about you doing, you're still a loser because you wanted to. If you ever wanted to, then you are bad by this attack. So again, back up, don't respond to the bait, don't argue about whether you do the thing or whether you want to do the thing. Back up and since there are multiple presuppositions here, you can pick which one to respond to. And it's not actually that important to decide which one you do respond to. You can respond to the one you think is a stronger attack, or the one that matters more to you, or the one you think is going to be easier, whatever. You'll get a chance to address all of them if you want to. But for instance, if you have a mother who says to you, if you really cared about my health, you wouldn't want to dress that way. It upsets me so. Okay, so you now have a mom who is implying a whole bunch of things at you, criticizing the way you dress. But the presupposition in there is you don't care about her health. So back up and look at that. You can either respond with, when did you start thinking I didn't care about your health, mother? Because if she actually cares about that, she can have a conversation with you about that in leveler mode. If that's just misdirection to hurt you, she's going to be discombobulated and not really want to continue that line of conversation because she doesn't want to have an outright conversation about that. Or you can go computer mode and go, it is an interesting idea that people don't care about other people's health. You would think that human beings would naturally be concerned about one another's health, but then look at the state of the healthcare system today. We've gotten really, really far from criticism of your clothing, which is great because you didn't want to talk about that anyway. So this is great if you don't, you can decide whether you want to lead into a leveler thing with the relationship with this person, if you want to involve more of the feelings and the connection, or if you just want to go straight off somewhere else and leave them going, wait, what are we talking about? But these are both essentially computer mode. The when type of question is safer than other kinds of questions like who gave you that idea or what gave you that idea, which can include other kinds of presuppositions you don't want to get into and can end up looking like attacks or leaving you open to attacks. So when is great. If someone says, if someone says something that includes a presupposition of you don't care about me or you don't care about something else, the when did you start thinking that is the best phrasing for a question about that. And then the other approach is a very impersonal commentary on that sort of phenomenon that doesn't connect to the bait that they've put out there at all. Here's another attack. Don't you even care? Notice that most of these have this very exaggerated sing-song intonation. It's a telltale sign of a verbal attack. It's not about the verbal content in that case. It's about the emphasis. It's possible to ask someone whether they care about something in leveler mode in a genuine way. Well, do you care about what the other people at the company think about this, or does that not matter in this case? That's a real question. Don't you even care what they think of you is a criticism. It's not a question. It's assumed that you care, and it's assumed that you should care and that you should feel bad about doing things that indicate you obviously don't care. There's a whole bunch of suppositions wrapped in there. You should care. You don't care. You're a terrible person for not caring. You should feel guilty about it. Everyone who does care does this other thing that you're not doing. Basically, there's something deeply wrong with you and you should feel terrible. You don't belong here at all. All of that is wrapped up in don't you even care about whatever. You can respond to this with a rather shocking response of, no, why? You want to be a little careful with that one. It depends on the context. If you are, for instance, talking to a children's children's court officer and they ask you whether you care about your children, you probably don't want to respond with that kind of approach. But in a social context where someone is trying to bully you, it can be a pretty good one. It's going to stop them completely because they don't expect that. You probably can't use it more than once, at least not on the same person or in the same social context. But it certainly does pull the rug out from under them. If you want to be a little more real with people, maybe this is a connection that you really want to foster, but this person is behaving badly at the moment. You can say, yes, of course I care, as well you know, and I really resent you're trying to make me feel bad about it. I already feel bad about it. That's a real response. Doesn't address the whether you do the thing at all, just about whether you feel bad or whether you care. If they're accusing you of not caring in the presuppositions, you can address that directly. One example here, you have a doctor who says, don't you even care about the health of your family because of the secondhand smoke from your still smoking? Well, you can say, been my doctor for 10 years. When did you start thinking I don't care about my family's health? This is the when did you question again, useful. Also directs the person's attention to their actual experience. Like, why are you claiming I don't care when you already know me? You have all this counter evidence about what I care about health and my family and so on. You can also question the connection that they're claiming. Does your experience and research lead you to believe that nicotine addiction is cured by knowledge of harm? That's a little sarcastic, but it's real too. You can also go very computer. If it's not safe to be real with a person, you can say something like, the question is worth exploring. However, before any attempt can be made to answer it, one would have to determine the cause for this indifference that you've noticed. A number of possible factors come to mind. Your perspective would be an invaluable one. Do you suppose this is limited to the department, or is it a general problem in the entire industry? This takes it way away from you and your behavior and is again going to discombobulate your attacker. So the type of approach that you want to use in defending is going to largely depend on where you want to go with the relationship with the person. If you're trying to continue it and just like correct their bad behavior right now and still form a connection, that's one thing. If you just want to defend yourself and get out of the situation, that's another. So that can shape which kind of an approach you take. Here's another attack pattern. Even you should be able to. It can be simply you. They can also use a category that you're in, a woman, a 7th grader, a plumber, someone who didn't graduate from high school, a foreigner. You can put any kind of a category in there that you want to imply that whole category has something wrong with them, that they're somehow ignorant or less able or something. That everyone should be able to do this, that your category or yourself individually are less able to do this, and that you should feel bad about your inability and also about your being in the whole category. So even if you can do the thing, don't start arguing about whether you can do the thing. That's not the attack here. If you start arguing about whether you can do the thing, you've already lost. So back up, go to the presuppositions. The claim that women are less capable or knowledgeable is a sadly common one, but I'm surprised to hear it coming from you. You've addressed the presupposition. You've actually implied a compliment to the speaker because you wouldn't have expected them to be insulting like that. But to accept the compliment, they have to deny the insult to you. So they can, at this point, insult you outright or say something like, oh, I didn't mean that, sorry. Either one is better than the underhanded insult. In some cases, you don't want to try to fight back against this. Let's say you're a nurse and you have a patient who says, even a nurse should be able to tell I'm in a lot of pain here. Well, this is insulting to your medical expertise, but you're also dealing with someone who is, in fact, in a lot of pain. And it's probably better to just say something like, you're absolutely right, and I'm going to do something about it right away. If they're not an absolute jerk, they'll probably say, thank you, I'm sorry, I'm so cranky. And then you can say, it's okay, you're in pain, I know. No problem. If they're actually an asshole and they're like that all the time, you'll probably know that from dealing with them, and you may have other approaches. But basically, you don't want to use more force than is necessary in countering these, because sometimes someone is just in distress and flailing. You don't need to attack them back. So if someone says to you something like, even someone who doesn't care about other people's feelings should be able to make an effort once in a while. Okay, they've just combined two attacks in there. They've got even your category, and they've said to someone who doesn't care. So they've kind of looped two in there. They've said that you don't care about other people's feelings. They've said that your whole category of people doesn't care. And they've said that your whole category of people, that you're not willing to make an effort. You never make an effort. You can argue about whether you make an effort, but then you're going to lose. You're going to look stupid bringing up instances where you did something and they're like, yeah, that's one little thing. I'm talking about the whole history of our relationship or whatever. You're going to look ridiculous if you start arguing, well, I sometimes do. Back it up. Look at the presupposition. When did you start thinking I didn't care about other people's feelings? Again, if they're really concerned about that, they'll talk to you for real about that. If they just want to insult you, they'll be insulting. Then you can go, oh, you're just being insulting. I don't have to actually emotionally care about this. I don't have to feel hurt, you know? So if a person responds to that with, well, you're never there for me, get them to tie it to a specific instance. You say, when did you start feeling this way? Well, you know, like the other day when you didn't back me up in that meeting. Okay, you want to get a cup of coffee and talk about it? Then you can have a conversation in leveler mode about what happened and why they were hurt and whether you think you should change your behavior about it, or at least apologize for it, or understand why you're behaving a certain way and how it struck them. You can have a real conversation where nobody's insulting each other. So again, with some people, it's possible to bring it to a point where you can have a leveler type conversation where you're actually talking about your feelings and trying to solve problems. Then these have all been blamer attacks. They're all trying to attack someone directly. There are also computer attacks that sound neutral and abstract, but are actually twisty little knives. Everyone understands why everyone in the department understands why you can't keep up with the job requirements. Everyone understands why you would have trouble following along in the book like this. Note that there is not even content. The why is left completely blank. And here's the secret about this attack. This attack can even sound sympathetic. It sounds like it's nice. We're understanding that this is hard for you, right? It's possible to say, hey, I know this is hard. And that's sympathetic. This attack is not sympathy. It is an attack. And it's a really sneaky one because everybody has something that they're ashamed of, that they're afraid people will know about them. And the person who's saying everybody understands why may not even have a thing in mind. They certainly may not have the same thing in mind that you are, in fact, self-conscious about. So for God's sake, don't give it to them. If they say to you, everyone understands why you can't keep up, don't tell them that you feel self-conscious because you have less education, or you're a woman, or you're coming from another country and don't understand all of the vocabulary, or you're not traditionally attractive and you think people look down on you. Don't tell them what your weak point is. They've claimed that they know your weak point. They probably don't. And if they do, and they want to make a point of it, they're going to have to say that out loud. Don't let them hurt you without even saying it out loud. So one possible approach to this one is, oh, how very kind. Take them at their word. Leave it at that. They're saying that everyone understands. That's nice. Don't argue that actually you can keep up, or that whatever your implied impairment is isn't really an impairment. Hey, now they know what you're nervous about, right? Or now you're admitting that it is a potential problem. If you could also say, I don't know what you're talking about. Make them say it or move on and change the subject. You can also roughly say how very kind of them in computer mode. Communities that can rally around a member in the way you describe are truly to be commended and a credit to their leadership. Again, you've complimented them, as long as they are, if they want to accept the compliment, they're going to have to do it without insulting you. If it turns out they're really meaning to insult you, then they don't get to have the compliment. So most people are not going to go, no, actually, I meant to be insulting at that point. It's not going to work. So you want your response to admit nothing, take the presuppositions at face value, and leave them at a loss. Complimenting them by implication is kind of a bonus, because then they're going to look particularly ungracious if they try to go, no, I meant to be insulting. Be sure to compliment in third person, though. Something like, oh, the manager of a company like that is truly admirable, rather than, oh, you're so great, which is going to look fake and pretty obviously look like a trick. Another variation on this, another attack, a person who X would Y. A person who actually cared about their children would show up to every PTA meeting and bake sale. You can put whatever you want in the X and in the Y. And it may or may not be true. It may be a ridiculous claim, or it may be perfectly reasonable. But one way you can respond to this is say, that sounds perfectly reasonable. Because what that does is avoid arguing about whether you do the thing or not, and just leave it there. If they mean to claim that you don't do the thing and that that's important, then they're going to have to actually say that. Or they can follow your lead and talk about it in computer mode. I couldn't agree with you more. The problem is, of course, deciding how a situation of this sort shall be dealt with. If you do this kind of response deftly enough, the person will be left going, wait, is there a situation I don't even know about? Is there some other problem? Now they're going to be confused and off balance, because apparently you're aware of a problem and they're not. So now they're worried about something else. They're not thinking about attacking you anymore. Another attack. Why don't you ever? This is a blamer attack. Presuppositions. You should do this thing. You never do the thing. You could do the thing if you wanted to. This one is usually used by people you have a close relationship with rather than a more impersonal business relationship, which makes it tougher. I mean, we're kind of escalating in difficulty here. It's really important not to give in to the temptation to attack back, to throw back. Well, you never do this other thing. It's just going to be a really big fight. If you have a loved one who uses this kind of phrasing with you, you need to train them out of it, not fight with them. So don't argue that you sometimes do the thing. It'll just be pathetic. Instead, say something that in itself contradicts the accusation. Not arguing with the accusation, but doing something that contradicts it. For instance, if you have a partner who says, why did you ever do a thing to make me happy? Offer them something, preferably something you don't think would make them happy, but something that would be a big move. Sweetheart, do you think maybe you'd be happier if we quit our jobs and moved to Wyoming? One caution on this, if this actually would make them happy, you have to be prepared to follow through on it. But if you pick something that's fairly outrageous, they're likely to go, what? No. And then you can go, okay, then, well, we don't have to do that. What would you like for dinner? You've brought it back down to earth. Again, ask their wishes. You're not arguing about whether you ever do anything to make them happy. You're just making gestures to make them happy, both silly ones and serious ones. It's not fun for them to play this game anymore because you're not arguing with them. You're not playing back. You're just kind of breaking that bad habit. And it's contradicted their accusation without your claiming anything. You just did something. Here's a particularly nasty attack. Some people would respond worse to you doing this other thing. Some X's would Y when you X. For instance, some instructors would automatically fail a student who turned in a paper that looked like that. There are a whole bunch of presuppositions in here. It's wrong for you to do the thing. I'm special and superior because I'm granting you leniency about it. I have the power to stop you or punish you, and I'm choosing not to use it. You should feel grateful to me. You should feel guilty. All of those things are wrapped up in the some people would when you do this thing. Again, don't fall for the bait. Don't argue that you did or didn't or don't or do or whatever. Instead, make them state their actual position. They're trying to accuse you, but also take credit for not accusing you. Don't let them do that. You can say, really? It would be interesting to hear your position on the matter. Make them say, what do they think about it? Do they actually think that you should be flunked? Or do they think that actually that would be a bad policy? They don't get to imply a position and then claim a higher ground somehow. You could also say, that's been said a good deal and is certainly an interesting idea. Computer mode doesn't make any claims on your part, makes it very abstract. Sounds phony and pretentious, but you know what? What they said sounded phony and pretentious. You're meeting them on the same ground. Now, here's a conversation with someone you care about who is using that kind of approach. Some husbands would be less understanding of their wives wanting to go back to work while the kids are babies. Okay, that's a power move. It's an abusive power move. You don't have to respond to it in his language by attacking back or placating or any of that or arguing. Really, it would be interesting to hear your position, darling. Well, I don't think you should go back to work while there's so little. Okay, now he's stated his position rather than trying to play power moves. You can talk about that. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Leveler. You can talk about his concerns and your concerns without it being a power play where he is saying, I'm more forgiving than other men. Maybe I'll let you go back to work, but you should feel guilty and grateful. That's not cool. Saying, well, I have these concerns, you have these concerns, let's work something out. That's respect and connection. Basically, if you want to resolve a problem or nurture a relationship, you need to both get into leveler mode. If you just want to avoid being abused, stick with computer, get out of the situation. Don't counterattack unless you absolutely have to. It's almost always better to just parry the attack and leave the attacker to either state their problem plainly or leave you alone, one or the other. There's lots more you can work in here, but those are the attack patterns and the general principles. There's lots more in this whole series of books and lots you can do with kind of thinking about your own situations. But basic idea is notice the presuppositions. Notice how you feel after you talk to somebody and think about what they said and what the presuppositions behind it are. Next time you talk to that person, think about the presuppositions they're using and go for the presuppositions rather than the bait they're dangling in front of you. It will undermine their attacks and leave you feeling stronger and better able to solve problems with them or without them. So yeah, I strongly recommend all of Suzette Haden Elgin's books. She is a science fiction writer and a PhD in linguistics, or rather she was, but she's probably best known for these verbal self-defense books. Again, you can probably find them used, but they are all out of print and have been for many years, last I heard. So let's talk about it.